I'm Nick Terzo, and you are listening to The Radical. My guest this week has established himself in the past decade as one of the preeminent songwriters in rock and pop. Focusing as a teen on what made a song work and using his New York hustle to track down hitmakers, he could easily have been a music historian. In 2019, he held down the Billboard Rock Songwriters chart's #1 position for 9 weeks. His hits have included Panic at the Disco's High Hopes and Fitz and the Tantrum's Hand Clap. Songwriter Sam Hollander and I chop it up about what it takes to collaborate with huge artists, having Andy Warhol as a babysitter, and his practice of creativity. My conversation with Sam Hollander. Hey, Sam.
Hey.
Thank you for joining the show.
What's up, Nick? How you doing, my man?
I'm excited to see your face. I have not seen it in a while or heard your voice in a while, so this is fun for me.
It's aging rapidly.
Join the march to the ocean.
No. I try to will a Benjamin Button situation every day. I don't know if it's manifesting, but I'm trying.
Awesome.
Hey.
We all are trying our best to live our best lives here. So
that's right.
So how have you got? I mean, how has anything changed? Like, look, everything's changed in the last year. There is no back to normal, I don't think. In songwriting, did you still do collaboration? Was it done through Zoom, or how did you work last year?
You know, I felt like I was the last human on Zoom. You know what I mean? Like the front end of the pandemic was pretty traumatic. I lost a very close friend. And, you know, when he passed, I don't know. I just went into hibernation mode. I didn't really feel anything creatively. And then I came out of that and I realized I had to, you know, create to stay, keep my cognitive abilities moving. So I thought of maybe I tried to sort of access any situations where people were writing in backyards 100 yards away from each other where we could just shout it out. I actually one day I wrote with Greg Wattenberg and Johnny Resnick from the Goose. We wrote in a basketball gym, an open air basketball gym in the middle of December in Connecticut. And we were, I think, 25 yards away from each other. And it was a little ludicrous, but, you know, just anything for the human contact. But I kept, on the Zoom front, I finally, in the winter, began Zooming aggressively just to get the muscles going, you know, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it doesn't replicate the in-person experience for me because I enjoy all the tangible sort of visceral shit that you feel when you're, you know, digging in a room and I'm dancing around and I'm just like, you know, I don't know, man. There's like an essence I was missing. But that being said, there were some perks. I liked avoiding rush hour traffic. I liked, there were shorter days and, you know, less debating, you know, whatever topic of the morning for an hour. It's you know, I love the socialization, but if it's old friends, we can get into it, hit it, and then I can go on and, you know, get cardio going or something. So it was you know, I've learned it's a necessary evil. There's days I dig it. Yesterday was a great day. Previous ones, sometimes not as great, but you know, you just keep grinding.
Right. And do you, because I get a sense when you're in the room, you're kind of like a high energy guy in my mind. So do you bring that in, I would think, physically, and that makes a difference.
I'm a spark plug, you know what I mean? Like I come in, I approach it like a bit, maybe I'm a baseball pitcher, but I approach it like I'm coming in, I'm closing. I just want to come in and I'm just like so ramped up because I've done all sorts of due diligence before. Whoever I worked with, I've done days of due diligence on end. Like I study tendencies, lyrical, melodic. I listen to interviews, spoken interviews, just to understand their verbiage and understand what feels natural and indigenous and something that just feels absolutely, as opposed to something that just is, I just don't want to come with some pitch bullshit with somebody that wasn't thought out. And that's always kind of been my game. Like I really, I put the work in. So, I love that feeling of walking through the room. One of my favorite joys in this business is like striding into a room knowing that I've got it figured out and knowing that I have the roadmap of the day and lyrically or melodically or whatever. And it just, that blueprint is so hard to ascertain, I think, on Zoom. It's just different because you can't read their faces. You know what I mean? Like right now, I'm looking at you and, we're doing great. But secretly, if I didn't know you and I'm staring at your face, that could be a look of horror. So that's the hardest thing for me is just to make sure, reading the room is exceptional. Like it's a skill and it's so imperative for what we do.
And that's what's interesting about you in a way, because I think you're part historian. And like you have this ability to kind of like you put the work in to understand this so nuanced, every little nuance.
I'm just
that's
a
like
nerd,
a great
man.
thing. That's it. No, that's fantastic.
I'm just like one of these guys who grew up. I was a colossal fan. All I ever wanted to do was buy records at flea markets and study them like baseball cards. And so my idols were producers and songwriters and just all these cats that I read on the back of the records. And historically, I grew up like I really listened to every genre and every era, and I really that was school for me. So I try to pull from all these varied sources when I'm writing, and it becomes some semblance of musical gumbo, where I'm just pulling from different eras and different influences and trying to create something new. And that's always been how I wake up in the morning. It's like the joy of just knowing that maybe I can harness, my spirit is like looming in 72 one morning, and maybe another one it's in 64, and another one it's like I'm sitting with Billy Idol and Steve Stevens in 1984, like having the summer of my life in my head, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah. How do you, I'm curious about this because I think of this in my own situation. It's like when we were kids, I don't know how we got exposed to so many different genres of music. What was the difference? I mean, we never went down a particular path. Everything was I heard everything when I was a kid in the 70s.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, where I grew up, there was that pivotal moment where you either were a Kiss fan or you weren't. Now, I was a Bee Gees fan, right? And so at the age of 7 or 8, I get in scraps in the schoolyard defending Barry Gibb and his brilliance. And of course, disco ends up, Kiss ends up making a disco record. So they joined my club. They knew I was right? Desmond steps in or whoever, and suddenly it's like Four on the Floor. And that's my favorite Kiss anyway. Like that's the Kiss that I want to listen to. But, in my house, my mom was like this Mingus head. She was into Mingus. She was into Bill Evans. She was into some pretty neat stuff. And then my mom was listening to Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. I mean, my mom was rad, right? And then she turned me on to Blossom Dearie, and we used to listen to a lot of like the Blossom Dearie records that she put out on Daffodil in the early 70s, where it was like Cocktail Trio, but the grooves are like funky. It's like some stuff that Questlove would be like, oh, that's like nasty. It was like groove based. And I just listened to all that stuff. I had an older brother who came of age in the 70s, and he grew up listening to like Shit Kicker, Skinner and the Outlaws and Molly Hatchet and like all this Eagles and all this rock stuff, and then a lot of classic rock. And all these forces just came together as I was a kid. And I just was I had no musical elitism, man. So like to me, I can find the heart in any genre because to me it's all song based, and that's the thing that brings me joy. So it doesn't matter how you dress it up. If I connect to like the core of the bones of the song, I don't care what the genre is. I can totally get it.
Wonder if that's what the difference is in a way. Maybe we're just songologists and it was just the song, not the genre,
I think that's probably it. I mean, there's definitely like, there was like, I wasn't a hair band guy. I missed it, but but when White Lion came out with like, is that White Lion?
I thought that was theirs. Wait.
That sounds right. Like when Wait comes along or Dokken or one of these things, like these songs, they were certain songs that I was like, that's awesome. I get it. So that I still feel the same way, even, in this era, even as songwriting has changed and, choruses don't get off the way they used to. And it's a lot of choruses that are anticlimactic and all this stuff. I just try to listen through it and think, okay, but if I strip this down to the essence of the song, would I back it? And that's how that's how I listen to everything.
Right. And you've been in plenty of rooms with kind of the legends, maybe, from your childhood and stuff. And I mean, what's it like being in a room like that versus being with your peers? I mean, and I imagine you've surmounted it at this point, but maybe not.
It's interesting. I was blessed with a couple things as a kid. My mom was really rad. My parents were wonderful. They're both artists. And my mom was working with Andy Warhol when I was a little kid. I had this really weird backstory where my mom was his interior decorator for a while. They partnered even on a restaurant at one point. And at the same time, Andy's boyfriend was a guy named Jed Johnson, who was a brilliant designer and also he directed some of the Andy's movies coming out of the factory. And on weekends, every once in a while, it didn't happen a lot, but maybe three, four times, something like that, they would drop me at Andy's apartment at the weekend when I was 8 or 9, and I'd sit with Andy and his maids in the kitchen, and he would babysit me while my mom was running around gallivanting, just buying pieces and stuff. So what that did for me is early on, I was exposed to like a weird level of like sort of Studio 54 era celebrity stuff where I just met people through my mom in the mid to late 70s, early 80s. And I was a little kid, but it took away fear. And that really was one of the great gifts that was sort of bestowed on me, because I honestly, I'm not shook when I get in a room with anybody. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if it's Carole King or Ringo or, the OJs or Tom Jones or any of those people, or if it's an 18-year-old kid with a laptop who literally made his first beat last week, put it on TikTok, got signed, and some label called me to work with him, whatever. I can take all of the hyperbole out of it, and I really am just trying to bond with somebody at the core. And that's been the great gift that I really am very grateful to my parents for that, because it was always a hell of an advantage, because I'm not flustered. So that helps tremendously.
Did you see the Halston movie yet on Netflix?
It's on the queue, and I am so excited to watch it. It's definitely on the queue.
It's not bad. Is that Ryan Murphy? I tend not to be a fan because I think he's just
hit or miss.
He's really hit or miss. And I don't know. On this one, I thought he was a little. Ewan McGregor, I thought was fantastic. So
I really need to see it. And
you'll relate to it.
That era I've always felt like is usually depicted in such like a caricature-y kind of way, which bums me out, And so I'd love to see if they got it right. I still have memories of it. I was a little kid, but I was pretty present, and I loved it because I love the music. And I don't know, I thought the whole thing was so fabulous and strange as a little guy that I was like, this is so sick. I love this. So it's dope.
So did a lot of that like inform your hustle? I mean, New York always makes someone hustle a little harder, than you would approach how you do it in LA.
New York defined me because you have to understand, if these were athletic terms, I was sort of the guy who I think the world was betting against. I was a tremendous underachiever, both academically and everything, and I came out in the world, and I really, at the age of 15, I knew what I was going to do in my life. Like, I never had a question. I always knew I was going to be a songwriter and a producer. It was just always, it was the only thing that ever took to. I can't do anything, Nick. You got to understand, I'm not a functioning human. We had a very, very awkward run-in yesterday. My wife and I were going for a walk, and where our cars are parked by this reservoir, there's a woman trying to put together like one of these like electric wheelchair things for her mother. And she's having a panic attack. She's saying, I don't know how it works. I don't know how it works. And my wife just looks at me with that look of disgust because she knows that there's nothing I can do to help this woman. And so normally I plead, I say, look, I'm inept. I can't do anything. This might be, so I don't want to embarrass myself in front of you by feigning interest in this and failing. So this one I actually stepped up and I feel like I did a couple things right. I didn't bring it home, but I was pretty close. I felt like I was a contributor yesterday, which was big for me. My wife usually is the more mechanical one, but I earned my keep. But the punchline being that New York, for me, was once identified that this was the only passion that I really had. New York presented this incredible mountain to climb, man. And it is. I always say this, and it's completely true. I used to have a knapsack of cassettes. I used to stand outside Black Rock, the old Sony building. I memorized all the faces from Billboard. There was a newsstand on 23rd and 6th. I lived in Chelsea. There's a newsstand. There's a Barnes and Noble, on 22nd, between 22nd and 23rd on 6th Avenue. And I would read Billboard cover to cover, study all the faces, all the A&R names from the gold record trade shots. So it's like, here's, Donnie Einer, Tommy Mottola, you get on the list, Don DeVito, all these guys. And I would study their faces and then I would accost them outside the Black Rock building because I felt like I was the one guy. If I was handing out tapes, I actually had memorized all their names and was able to put a face to the name. So it didn't, it was one of those things. The hustle was so hard. I would send out demos all night. I would reset, like literally, like I'm going to talk about like straight up, like looking in the phone book. I got my first gig interning at DNA Records on 141st and Malcolm X Boulevard. I got that internship solely by like a phone number in the white pages. I looked up the guy, who ran it and I don't know. My hustle was legit. Because I also knew that there was no fallback. I dropped out of college. I'd been through 3 colleges by the time I was 20. So it just wasn't meant to be. So.
Yeah. Well, now, I mean, it must be slightly, look, you're once a hustler, you always hustle sort of, but I mean, you have a reputation now, you have all these hits under your belt. What's it like now? I mean, how do you pick your projects? How do they come to you? Do you kind of like target people and say, you know what, that guy is talented or that girl, and I'm working with them?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, Nick, I'll tell you the truth. I've been a whore my whole life, and I really, if anything, if I saw an end game where I felt that this was going to push my narrative forward in some way, shape, or form, I tend to take it, even if aesthetically it wasn't my thing, And a year and a half ago, I sold my catalog. I sold 499 songs to Merck at Hypnosis. And the reason I did it was for the next act, I really want to be able to be hyper selective and just really do labor of love at this point. I really, I love what I've accomplished. And I really stand by the body of my work. I really dig what I've done so far. But now for the next wave, I really just want to, like really hyper focus on things that just like move me as opposed to just chasing chart stuff. Cause I don't know. I feel like that the opportunity presented itself and that felt like a way to really alter my process a little bit. And it's been magical so far. It's been, even during the pandemic, just being able to sort of pick and choose a little bit. It's very freeing,
Having done that last year, then, I mean, do you have a relationship with that now that you can, I mean, it sounds like you've separated, people get so attached to their music from the past but is it just a clean slate? It's like, this is great. I mean, does it feel that way?
I look at it like this, my name is on these songs forever. My name is on the songs. If anyone goes down the rabbit hole of a song, maybe there's an interview where an artist might talk about my involvement and say something hopefully very nice. That means the world to me. I don't care about the rest, I don't care about the rest. It's pretty funny. Occasionally a song will come on in a commercial or a movie and I don't get the requests anymore. They don't go to my manager. So sometimes it's a surprise to me, like everyone else, like, oh, wow, that was a nice sync. Nice work. But it's just freeing. It's like I once a year I make it a habit to take the car. Whenever I'm in LA, I take the car, I do the ocean drive, and I listen to like the body of my career. Like I listen to sort of the pivotal songs in my eyes, and it's a very emotional thing for me. But I only do it once a year, And that's it. Like once a year, I just want to reconnect with my story, internally, and try to just dial some of the emotion in, and just realize where it all came from and how it started and built. But then it's over. And then it's not nostalgic. It's pushing forward always to the next, because I just want to beat what I did. I want to get better. It's like really like practicing, just getting better every day.
Right. I mean, when you did the like New York to like LA transition, like, 10 years ago or a decade ago, I got a sense that from some of the stuff I've read and knowing you that you had some self-doubt, a little bit into like I don't know, I use the word crisis, but it sounded like you had a lot of self-doubt and you were unsure of your path when you did that.
You know, Nick, I went cold when I got to LA. It's funny. We got off the plane. Me and my wife and my kid, we get off the plane. Black car picks us up to take us to our rental house, and we're in the car, and one of my songs comes on the radio. And I'm thinking, this is like destiny, man. This is like, how fortuitous is this? This is this incredible moment. And then the next day, I just realized no one cared. I got there, and it was humbling because in New York, a lot of people left New York, as we know. Like New York, obviously was the hub for so many years, but it really pushed to LA, pushed to Nashville, and New York thinned out a little bit. And I was the beneficiary of a lot of work because there just weren't that many cats in town, in my space. And I got out to LA, and there were a lot more cats. And music was shifting at the same time. As Max and Luke were really like in the zeitgeist at that moment, and they really dialed into that thing. Music, pop was shifting. And as I watched the landscape shift, I was sort of disconnected from it musically. And then the alternative stuff, suddenly you had this wave of Foster the People, the end of the MGMT thing. You had these really badass, like the last sort of, to me, the last really great wave of alternative stuff in a row. Like there were some really new bands that broke. And when that happened, I would dissect those songs and I really couldn't figure out why they were working. And that scared the hell out of me because historically I was able to break things down to the essence of the song. And then I'd build it back up and just to understand why a song actually resonated. And on these songs, they were just beyond me in some weird way. I wasn't hearing them, and I began to panic. You know what I mean? And I took a gig during that time. I took a gig doing music for NBC's Smash for the second season of Smash. I did 30 something songs we tracked, and during that time, it was a really sexy gig on paper. But it took me out of the writing game for another 9 months. So now I'm already kind of lost. And then, I suddenly I removed myself from the everyday grind of it. I get back in, I'm just not hearing it. And I had a couple of like hits during that time, but I was so disconnected from what I was writing. I felt zero connection, zero sort of resonance to any of it. I wanted out. And right around that time, I hit a wall. And I came back east for a break, and I came back and I just went through this weird catharsis, man. Like I had this crazy dinner. I went out to dinner with a gentleman named Steve Nash, who's a basketball player. He's now the coach of the Brooklyn Nets. Go Nets. Greatest. Soon to be NBA champ, Brooklyn Nets. A lifelong fan, by the way, from the Jersey days, so I can own this. But so I went to dinner with this guy and my friend Jeremy, and we went to dinner, and we're talking about process. And Steve Nash said something. We asked him, we said, how do you at this point, he's probably a 38-year-old point guard in the NBA, and he's playing against 17-year-old kids who I would assume could literally like catapult over him, And we said, how do you keep it up? He said, well, look, he said, I in my third year in the NBA, my numbers were like plummeting, and I saw a sports psychologist, and the guy prescribed like a healthy dose of yoga, tai chi, meditation, swimming, just all these different disciplines. But he said you can never take a day off during your regular season. So when you're in regular season mode, you write every single day. You create every single day. You do it as some sort of discipline. He said when he started doing these exercises and never took a day off during the season, suddenly his numbers went through the roof again. And he was able to maintain that level of consistency for the rest of his career. He's a Hall of Fame player. And I began to, as I was walking home through the arches that night through Washington Square, I was thinking about my own life and my own career. And, I've been writing with Dave Katz for about 5 or 6 years, and we'd had this incredible run together. But I think we both knew at that point we were beginning to phone it in because everything was kind of working. And then you start to just repeat more of the same, and I felt like we were phoning it in a little bit. And I knew I was from my end. Lyrically, I was doing all these escapist themes. Like, how many escapist lyrics can you do? You know what I mean? I just kept writing different versions of it. And so that night, I made this strange vow to myself that during the season, and my season is basically late September to the holidays, and then late January to Memorial Day. The summers are off because I write with bands and I write with artists and they're on tour, you know? So I have a defined year, which is somewhat like a high school teacher's, but I realized during those periods, I have to write 7 days a week and I have to do something. I have to put something on paper every single day. So maybe it was a stack of titles, maybe it was verses, choruses, voice notes. Maybe it was just like a change that I liked and sort of hum something over. And once I started that routine, my career just completely transformed. I became a completely different writer. I was like so much more present. I felt like my when I walked into the room, my first step was just on. I was just extremely focused, dialed in, no bullshit. And it changed my life, man. And that I owe to New York and a weird night of happenstance, but it took me that to come back to New York to get my bearings, to then fly back a week later to LA and just start killing it. So for me, that's how it worked.
Wow, that's a great story. I love that Steve Nash was part of it.
Steve Nash, and honestly, the nicest guy in the world, like the disgustingly nice guy, so sweet and just really, really insightful. So,
yeah. So now, as you go into a room now, as Sam Hollander 2021, what do you think your greatest asset is you bring into that room, into any room?
I feel like I'm a grown ass man. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I have a lot of experience and a lot of tricks. And that helps because sometimes I have to be the grown up in the room. I got to be the OG. And then also when I'm working with the legends, I'm able to come at it from a different attitude because I can sort of harness some of the younger aspects of record making right now and some of the tricks that the kids use. So I'd like to believe in some weird way I'm kind of like a conduit between generations. I'm in that weird place in my life where, I've worked with people who are 80 plus and I've worked with people who are 18. So it helps because I can really kind of throw down in a lot of varied situations and with zero setback, I would like to believe.
Right. Have you ever had, and you don't have to mention who the person was.
Bring it.
I mean, have you ever had just like the worst experience of my life walking in that room, or has that ever happened where you just
man? I've had
I give up.
I've had so many, man. I've had so many of them. The way it works out, the way it shakes out is if I'm in a year where I'm on the rotation of co-writes with artists or whatever. I'm on that treadmill. If I'm hitting it 5 or 6 days a week in person, or let's say 4 days a week in person, to be honest, if I'm doing that and it's a full year, there's going to be 1 to 2 horrific days a year. I once had a kid come in, and he was coming off. He had had a pretty big, decent sized pop hit. It was the early 2000s, and there was the follow up was taking forever. There was nothing. And, he was this really good looking kid, sort of boy band kid. And he comes in the studio, but now he looks different. He looks very grunged out. He's looked like, he's working through something, and he comes to the studio and I tell him, man, I loved your single, man. It was so great, man. And we're going to build off that, do something along those lines. And this is, I had this moment in my career, Nick, where in the years that I struggled, which were numerous and endless, on the front end of my career, 14 years of absolute failure. I was what I would refer to as a Z-list writer in terms of I would actually, it was really kind of like a P list. It was sort of like the Pan Am list. And the Pan Am list was an artist would be in New York and writing with like the 3 or 4 writers that really mattered at New York at the time, whoever they were. And then the artist checked out to fly back home that night. They had a night flight back to wherever they came from. They check out of the hotel at noon, and labels began to figure out, well, Sam Hollander, he's got a studio. It's in Soho. It's in a nice area. He's got this little shitty room in Soho. So I could send the artist down there with his bags. And
his way out of town.
On his way out of town. And he could do like 2 hours if he wants with Sam, or he can just leave his bags there and go shopping. But I became the de facto Pan Am list guy. So I was on this rotation of hell, and no songs were ever cut. It was a year of my life, but it completely set me up for the future because I began to really research every session I ever had ahead of time. Like my manager and I, Brett, I've had the same manager, Brett Deason, since 98, 99. And we really look into records. We want to know who the team is, who the manager is, who the label is, because if I don't know enough, I'm not going to spend my day on something. I really want to know that there are people involved who I trust who can deliver it, because as you and I both know, a shitty manager can ruin any record. And it's imperative to really like get the right team on something for it to work. I do believe in that. But sorry, so I'm on this session. This cat comes in and he pulls out an acoustic. Now his stuff had always been sort of synthy and sort of super programmed. He pulls out an acoustic and he just starts playing a little bit. And he's like, I'm going to do a song about World War II. And I was like, he's like, do you understand this was the greatest generation? I said, no, I do understand. Absolutely great. They're phenomenal. They're the greatest generation for a reason. Yes. Do you understand the suffering and hardships that I do. I totally do. I don't know how this has any bearings on the fact that I'm trying to come up with a Hail Mary single right now for your stuff that's supposed to be bubbly and sheeny. And he starts playing, but the body language is incredible because he starts playing and then he turns his back to me and my collaborator, Dave Schomer, that day. And he turns his back to us. And he just starts strumming. He's like, he's doing an Eddie Vedder kind of thing. He's like, I'm like, wait, this does not sound like pop. And he's like shedding the song and he's working out his feelings and they're very emotional. And look, I love the heart. It was very it redefined earnest, but he kept his back to us. So he's in my studio. He's got his bags there. He's flying out in 5 hours, but he's turned his back to me. He's just humming something. So this goes on for an hour. Finally, after an hour, man, hunger kicks in. I'm starving, man. I'm like, all right, hey, I'm going to go down to Aladoro down the street and just get a sandwich. Is that cool? And he just nods. I go and get a sandwich. I brought him back a sandwich. I paid the $10, got him a sandwich full of like prosciutto and like mozzarella, good stuff, Guy gives me nothing, man. Another hour. Now he's got like the foundation of a verse and a chorus. And I was like, okay, cool. Doesn't play it for us, just has his back to us the whole time. That was an incredible day. There are days like that. I could go on. The story just goes on forever, but you don't need.
Did you ever determine what that was like in retrospect? I mean, was it drugs? Was it something else?
No, it wasn't drugs. It was torture. It was a tortured artist. And, I think the pressure, look, one thing I've learned is I like working with an artist on their debut, right? Now that's changed a lot because a lot of these songs are being made in bedrooms in the middle of Omaha where some kid put up a beat that night or whatever and it reacted and they get their record deal. That changes the power structure a little bit because, when a label takes that kid and tries to jam him in a room with me, that kid is like, wait, who is this old dude? I don't want to be with that guy. I made this with my homies. Like, why would I want to like write songs with this guy? So that changed, but that's the biggest change I've seen on the horizon in the last few years. But outside of that, I think you want to be on the first record, and then you kind of want to be like the fourth record, right? So like you don't want to be there in that middle dip, but it's great to be there when everything's happy, and you want to be there on the fourth one when it's rehabilitating it, because I just want to be in a place where people are receptive to my ideas.
So freshman and senior years of high school, or
100%.
Where you come in. So
does anyone ever talk about their sophomore year? Like, oh, it was incredible.
Other than getting your driver's license, and nowadays no one cares, right? Back when we were kids, it mattered. Well, you were a city kid, maybe it didn't matter, but
It's just the whole thing. It's just, yeah, the Uber changes everything.
Yeah.
It's true.
So are you still, you'd always been kind of involved on the advocacy front for songwriters. Are you still involved with any of that, or are you not so much?
I'm definitely involved, but as an ancillary figure. I'm very supportive of SONA, Songwriters of North America, Michelle Lewis, Kay Hanley, Shelley Pike, and Pam Shane, Brendan Okrent, Adam Dorn, Jack Hugel. Like, these people are Adam Gargoni. These are great people. They're doing great work. And anytime they have something, I sign on, because they're just, they're kind of like our last hope. It's just, I just feel like this is always a moving target. And, I was very lucky. I was fortunate to be in a business at a time where, I was able to make a nice living doing it. And it's been a wonderful thing. And that is not lost on me how blessed I am. I'm nervous about the future for these people, because it's going to be very hard to string together long-term careers when the finances are just terrible. And if radio goes away, which I believe radio is going to go away, if Spotify remains where it is in terms of payments to writers, I just don't know. Owning a master is great. But if you're just a writer the way I was, I don't own masters. I'm just a guy who writes songs. So.
Well, now there's a new kind of controversy around the mechanical rate again, right? And It's kind of stuck in a certain position that it's been stuck in for a long time, and it was agreed to in the Music Modernization Act.
It just never ends. It just never ends. That's one of the things I sort of, I don't know. I have a lot of friends who are super optimistic, but I'm still somewhat of a pessimist in terms of these things don't rectify on a yearly basis. This is going to take years to actually alter that landscape.
Right. And what's a digital mechanical rate? It's what, 2 cents?
It's not. Yeah, I mean, come on.
It's nothing,
2/10
right?
of something. It's nothing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's nothing.
When I get my statements on that stuff, it's always like, okay, did I get beer money tonight? That's really I've talked with friends where I literally say a very successful song in 2021 with the streaming aspect, not the radio stuff or the syncs, but the streaming side of it, is if it paid my gas to the session, it was an incredible day. Wow. So it's dark.
Sad.
It's just dark.
Sad.
So that's why I still believe in radio, man. It's like radio to me was always the great equalizer. So I was always a radio guy because I grew up on radio. I was completely raised on it. And, I still believe, look, when I have a song that works at that level, I get paid what I feel like I deserve for the work. And, it's just, that's the most exciting time for me. So,
well, look, they built their whole business on the back of creative people too, and kind of got away with it. You know what I mean? Too.
Yep, 100%.
What they paid based on their advertising revenues.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So they got away with murder in a big degree. So not much different than Spotify,
Nick, this is why I need to become an artist in my old age. I need to get a great merch deal and, sell my merch to the 3 people who would care.
You're going on the road?
Yeah, to my backyard.
All right.
The backyard tour is going to be amazing.
All right. So tell me, I always love this story. You have a story about a relative when you did well and you had a breakthrough hit and you did very well with, and you had a certain relative who kind of topped you with what they managed to pull off, who weren't songwriters.
Yeah, my uncle John Hollander was a really, really heavy poet. He's a poet laureate sort of cat, and he was a professor at Yale for 1,000 years, and he wrote zillions of volumes of poetry and had a huge fan base in his world. And the year that I had my first #1 hit, I produced Cupid's Chokehold for Gym Class Heroes. In my family, I felt like, I had finally, I made a statement on behalf of our side of the family. I was so excited. I was like, yes, we put a big one on the board. It was great because my uncle was just in the house. He's the most revered character, And my uncle calls, he leaves a message on my voicemail, and I didn't hear from him much. He's much older, and, he's a man of few words, and he called up, he said, "Hello, Sam, it's your Uncle John. Have you heard of the Eagles?" Please call me back. Yeah. And I swear he said, what say these Eagles? But maybe I'm making that up at this point. It just sounds right when I say it. But picture, sort of like a John Houseman tone, like deep, like, you know. Um, and I call him back and he's like, Don Henley. I have an email here from a Don Henley. It says, John Hollander, we were a fan of your poetry. We took one of your poems, No More Walks in the Woods, and we set it to music. And we'd like to release it on our first record back in 100 years called Hell Freezes Over or whatever the hell it is. And we'd like to offer you publishing. And I just stopped. I was like, fuck. I was like, God, this guy's going to have a much bigger year than I am, man. And he's 80. And he did. The record came out. He got his publishing, and the record went like 3 or 4 times platinum or whatever. And here I am with like my one little hit, and he's there with it. He might have, God, he was a rock star, man. So that was very humbling, and
That's
it was
incredible.
a good lesson. It was a good lesson, man. In your family, you're never, you might think you're top dog. You're not even top dog in your own like family tree. So it was good.
Well, hopefully you gave him some good advice at least, so that he got proper.
I did. I hooked him up with my lawyer, Lisa Sokransky. I was like, yeah, this is great, man. You should meet Lisa Sokransky ASAP. So I called up Sokransky. I said, Lisa, I got a new client for you. He's 80 and he's a poet. And she's like, I'm like, and he has an Eagles cut. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, just go with this. Just ride it. So yeah, Lisa was the lawyer on that deal.
That's hilarious. Yeah. So before we wrap up, I just want to see what you got coming up. Is there anything you can talk about now or not?
Wow. I have a couple of things I'm doing right now that I can't actually talk about. Not like an NDA thing, but I'm a Jinx guy.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, I really think I have a really neat slate of stuff that's coming for the rest of the year. Like I sort of like I have like my little mood board thing I create in my head, and I would say like I look at it and there's some really badass shit that's coming in the pipeline very quickly, but I think it's gonna be more fun with the reveals. And some of it's just like so ludicrous and strange. You're going to be like, this guy's on crack. It's great. So I've been doing that. I've been working on a book a little bit. I don't know, man. I'm really like, I've been playing a lot of guitar. I'm just trying to get better melodically because, I'm a guy who's taken guitar lessons 25 times in my life. I quit every time I do it, including last fall. But I'm pedestrian enough to do Kumbaya and to sit outside, but it really does help me harness my melodic stuff. So many days I just sit out back and just sort of try to figure it out and shed ideas and just, little notes here and there, but I do make headway. So it's been a like strangely productive time, but I do have some great stuff coming, but I want to leave it as a cliffhanger if that's cool.
It's fine with me. And so with a daughter kind of heading into high school, right? I mean, does she turn you on to stuff that like you weren't aware of ever musically?
I'll tell you, man, like the genetic code is so strange, right? Like we're at that age where my kid doesn't even want to be in the same zip code that I'm in, right? They're supposed to hate their mom at this age. And I'm always encouraging her. I'm like, dude, you should be hating your mom. Like that's what all the books say. You're supposed to be like idolizing your dad and hating your mom. She hates me, man. So it's hard. We're a weird age. But the strange thing is, musically, our tastes are so similar. And it's funny because, my wife is not a yacht rock person, right? By trade. I'm a big yacht rock guy, right? With no irony, right? Like this is like, to me, like McDonald's and Loggins and Christopher Cross and Boz Scaggs are sort of like the holy quartet of joy. And, it's funny, like my wife was never a McDonald fan, and I brought her. We met Christopher Cross one night, and then McDonald. Someone hooked up for me and McDonald to meet one night backstage at a show. McDonald was like the most gracious, sweet guy, and she came out. My wife was like, "I love him." I'm like, "Be a fan then. Be a real McDonald fan. Don't be a fake fan."
That voice,
everything McDonald.
Come on,
he's the greatest ever. But my kid, she listens to all that stuff. It's not like she's sitting around. Yeah, she does the TikTok videos to like whatever the trap beat of the week is. But like for her, she loved Panic. Like my kid, who will also is the first to say to me, yeah, there's a lot of Panic songs I really like. I mean, they're less yours, but some of the ones they did without you, I just think are a little stronger. I'm like, thanks. But you know, she loves Panic. She loves AJR. She loves AJR. She loves you know, My Chem. Like she's discovering all that stuff, and then which was before her time, obviously. And then she loves, you know, she listens to like Steely Dan and the Doobies, and you know, Chicago and all this other stuff that she's obviously inherited through the bloodline. So
Wow.
I would say it's interesting. She does put me on to stuff, but less than when she was younger, because now I think her tastes have sort of matured into a different thing where she actually likes stuff like we're listening to the same stuff. A lot of Billy Joel, a lot of Springsteen, like stuff like that, you know? So it's neat, but she's a great A&R mechanism. I will tell you, I will play her something I've worked on and she'll just decimate it. Like, that doesn't sound like something I would listen to. I'm like, okay, thanks.
Oh, nice.
No, she's great. The industry better watch out. If she ever takes this turn, man, she's going to be a formidable force. She's a strong kid, so it's awesome.
Fantastic. Well, my friend, thank you for this catch up. It's really,
Brother,
I'm really honored to have you
man.
on here.
I give you a big hug. I give you a big hug right now, but obviously we're on Zoom, so I'm giving you the joy.
And I hope I see you soon on one of the coasts.
Absolutely, and seriously, thank you for having me. And to everybody out there, I would say, go be creative, go do something great, and do it every day of the week, whatever it is, whatever that you love, whatever you're chasing, just do it every day of the week to really keep the muscle going, and you will surpass your greatest expectations.
Great advice.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, man.
Stay healthy.
Later.
Thank you for listening. This show originates from the podcast capital, Austin, Texas. My producer is Sean O'Neill. Visit theradicalpod.com for updates and even some merchandise. Also, please subscribe at Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I also ask that you please share episodes with your friends so we can continue to grow our community. See you all again next Friday.